Hey guys, this is Neon for Clownfish TV, and I'm back, and I'm going to talk about the comic book industry because, you know, everything is fine. Everything is just peachy in mainstream comics, or not. Now, I saw this story thanks to Just Some Guy on Twitter. If you're not following Just Some Guy on Twitter and YouTube, you really should do that. He's got some really fantastic content. Very, very funny guy. Very funny guy. But this is actually coming from ICV2.com, which is regarded as one of the top comic book retail sites, top comic book sales-related sites. It seems that they are finally admitting that something is amiss with the mainstream comic book industry. So let's look at this article titled "Something Has to Change." Guest column by Phil Boyle of Coliseum of Comics. This was published yesterday. Phil Boyle, whose Coliseum of Comics chain is the largest comics and games retailer in the Southeast, has shared his thoughts on what he sees as his top 8 problems in the comics business, his solutions, and what publishers can do. You mean there are problems in the comic book industry? Oh my God. Oh my God, that's insane, because if you say that the mainstream comic book industry has problems, you are called all kinds of names on Twitter. So I guess Phil Boyle is going to be attacked on Twitter soon. Now, hopefully he is not, but it seems that he is actually vocalizing what a lot of retailers feel right now. But I think they're probably afraid to admit. Joe Field recently laid out some ongoing concerns for retailers that I agree wholeheartely with. I've been doing my own analysis of sales over the last several months because, as Joe put it, something has to give. Something has to give. I've spoken to several publishers about these concerns, and though they all seem to have a sympathetic ear when it comes to the plight of retailers, those fettered by large corporation policy will not be able to change things without some major catalysts. Now, he has been in business for 35 years, and he blames a lot of the problems on Diamond. Diamond, of course, having a monopoly here in the U.S., and he blames a lot of the issues on Diamond and their sales terms going back to 2006. So here are his solutions, and we're going to talk about how indie comics right now are actually remedying some of these problems, and how I really truly think that the future of the comic book industry, as we know it in North America, will be with indie publishers. So one of the problems, 90% of the books coming off the stands at the end of their shelf life have zero value as a back issue. I agree with that. Very few books now are worth anything. You see them bundled together in bargain bags at all these discount stores all over the place. I mean, you can get like 10 Marvel comics for $5, and these are comics that came out, 6-10 months ago. And he says, after 3 months, many books become box fillers and dead items that take up space. No one is looking for a 3-issue miniseries 6 months removed unless it features a new character and there's a rumor circulating about her inclusion in a movie that was possibly greenlit. Between February and October, we had at cost nearly $100,000 in books that were taken off the stands. 60% were instantly unsellable. 30% will languish if they're still here in 3 months. Ouch. His solution, we're looking at each title, and any title that falls in that 90% range is slated for sellout. What publishers can do, returnability is only part of the solution. Returnability. Now, for those of you who don't understand how the direct market works and why, and kind of how the direct market came about, back in the day, comic book publishers used to sell through drugstores, bookstores, etc. And when they did that, the books had returnability. That is, if the books didn't sell, they could always, send the books back to the publisher. Now, with the direct market, that has all changed. All of the risk is on the retailer. The retailer buys the books from Diamond, and if the books don't sell, guess what? They are out of luck. So a lot of retailers have been complaining about returnability and the fact that the books are not returnable. And, because the books are not returnable, these comic shops are getting, this glut of garbage that they can't sell. Now, I want to talk about Peter Simeti. Peter Simeti at Alterna Comics, we've had him on the show before. I think he is a very, very smart guy. He's been on here before. He's getting a lot of flack from the mainstream comic book industry because the guy has some really good ideas. So he must be doing something right, in my opinion. He's selling books for $1.50 in a market where most comics are $4. Now he's putting them on newsprint, but back in the day, comics were on newsprint, and they did fine. They sold hundreds of thousands, if not millions of copies when they were on newsprint. He's looking for alternative distribution outlets, trying to go outside of comic book shops. And he just recently announced that they will be doing a retailer buyback. I mean, this is kind of unheard of, right? This is kind of unheard of. Especially for a publisher this size. Peter Simeti said earlier today, seems like as good a time as any to announce this. I've been working on introducing a retailer buyback and trade-in program at Alterna Comics for shops that have overstock of single issues. I'm hoping to get this running in February. This is a really good idea, and I think a lot of the bigger publishers need to follow. They need to follow because the shops are drowning in overstock and back issues that they can't sell. So let's go down the list here. Number 2, the problem: reboots. No surprise, but every jumping on point creates in its wake a jumping off point. I completely agree with this. The goal of the reboot is, of course, to get those number ones. Marvel especially lives and dies by number ones and gimmicks, and the problem is every time you reboot the continuity, you alienate the people who followed the previous continuity, and they don't even commit to it for more than a year or two sometimes. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous, especially when you look at, when comics were incredibly popular, you had characters that had continuities of, 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, it was kind of a coup when DC rebooted its continuity in the 80s, Crisis in Infinite Earths. So that was kind of a coup back then. And, now it's like every other year. DC or Marvel are rebooting their timelines, and people are tired of it. So the greater concern is continuity. No, not continuity of Spider-Man wearing a hat on page 3 when he has his head cut off on page 2. The industry was built on reading and collecting comics. When you reboot, what has gone before is no longer valid, which contributes to the 90% mentioned in Problem 1. Yeah, people aren't going to buy back issues if those back issues don't mean shit anymore. I completely agree with this. With the prevalence of reboots, fans no longer feel invested, as they know that nothing is any more permanent than the current creative team. Pretty much, it seems like comic books now, especially from the big two, it's almost like they're self-contained movies. And once that creative team is done telling their story, the next team comes in, and they may just throw out what the previous team did. It's pretty ridiculous. There really isn't a lot of continuity anymore in mainstream comics. So my solution: keep making excuses. Well, that's not working. There's not really a solution, which is why this one is solely on the publishers. What publishers can do: commit to at least a 5-year plan. Even if creative teams change, the numbers shouldn't, so that some continuity of a series is in place. I said before, and I still stick by this, that the way to handle the reboots in comics, now he says a 5-year plan. I actually 20 years ago was saying I would have liked to see Marvel even commit to a 10-year plan, 120 issues from the same creative team, or mostly the same creative team, a story arc with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then you reboot the entire universe at the end of 10 years. But you try to keep the same people on the book, and tell a complete story, tell their story with that character. 10 years is a good chunk of time to be able to tell some decent stories, and then you reset it for the next group. And I think 10 years is a good span, because that's about the time I think people are going to read comics. They're really going to be into it after, 10 years. A lot of people just drop comics. I mean, now people are dropping comics after like a year or two. It's an expensive hobby. They're constantly rebooting everything, and people are just losing interest. Problem: first issues. This is number 3. This is the most abusive part of comic ordering. Let's define a first issue before I go on. Any issue ordered with no previous sales data for the title. If it's a weekly, every issue ordered before we have a week of sales data on number 1 is a number 1 for ordering purposes. If it's a one-shot, it's number 1. If it's number 1, it's number 1. Every number 1 these days seems to be double-sized or larger than normal size issue that adds $1 or more to the number 1 cover price, exacerbating retailers' exposure, and also padding the numbers for the big two, especially when they release an X-Men comic that's like freaking $7 or $8. Then they brag about their market share in dollars, or they have 100 gajillion variant covers, and then they can brag about how many copies they sold. And again, Peter Simeti, smart guy, said this earlier today too. Publishers use variants to bloat sales figures and create the illusion of demand. It's a predatory practice that puts a strain on retailers and damages the long-term health of the industry in favor of short-term gains. And yes, publishers are actually damaging the health of the comic book industry above and beyond, some of the ridiculous antics you see on social media. These abusive sales practices are gouging the retailers, and they're going out of business. They're going out of business. So his solution, if it's a weekly series, it's Predatory Publishing, and it gets subs-only orders, 0 for the stand. Sell out in 3 months, no one will remember it anyway. If it's a horribly priced number 1 we order to sell out, there will be a second printing if it's that great of a book. We're done chasing incentives. We'd rather chase profits. We're done chasing incentives. We'd rather chase profits. Smart man. On one-shots, we order subs and what we feel will be guaranteed sellout, which is what we think we might sell minus 20%. Publishers can do. What can they do? Set a reasonable number based on a similar book, which should not be 3 times of one of the mega crossover events. Anything above that, sell it to us at the aforementioned 50 cents. The problem, number 4, special covers from issue to issue. This is predatory publishing. 14 covers on number 1, 4, and 2, one of which is a Scotty Young variant, and one of which is a promotion of the month cover. Number 3 has 1 cover, but number 4 has 3 covers again. This is an obvious ploy, and inevitably leads to unsold books on the stands. Without some degree of stability, we're ordering blind. My solution, ordering to sell out, then ordering blind, sounds much better from my financial end. I'll be cutting to absolute sales levels. Before anyone cries that I'm being the maker of my own low sales prophecy by cutting orders, let me assure you that each of my stores will continue to carry the iconic characters and books championed by staff. Most fans can't afford to buy all the comics they want, so removing the 4-issue spin-off barely blah 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 will actually be a relief. What publishers can do, call the stand filling minis. I know, bottom line and more immediate bottom line right now, but you're killing the market. You're killing the market. A major comics retailer is telling the publishers they are killing the market with these practices, which means bottom line tomorrow will be worse. The problem, discounts. I have all the expected expenses for a business. Labor is on the rise. Insurance costs have skyrocketed after 7 years of double-digit growth. Sales have been mostly flat over the last 2 years. This is pretty much across the board for most comic shops if they're still in business. Sales are flat. People are losing interest for various reasons. Prices go up, but it just means fewer comics sold for more money. Wow, he's actually coming out and saying that. Prices go up, but it means fewer comics sold for more money. So every time, Marvel and DC go on about how amazing comic sales are, they're looking at they're looking at the dollar amounts usually, and it's basically, you sell 50,000 $8 books, you're going to make more money than 75,000 $3 books. So the math is I can no longer allow publisher space at a 50% non-returnable discount. The sales tail is too short and the variables are too many to accurately gauge sell-through. That Marvel can sell recent $4.99 books to Walmart that go for $3 to $5 means that the cost of these books are substantially cheaper than what they could be sold to us for. Yeah, I think they are. I don't know why. I mean, I understand printing costs have gone up, but you look at the DC Walmart 100-page books, and it's the same printing quality that's used in the 32-page books, and they can sell those for $4.99. So this is like they're really padding. And when you're printing in such large quantities, like Marvel and DC are printing, they're gouging retailers. I mean, they're gouging the retailers. My solution, subs are only on non-returnable books that are 50% or less discount. What publishers can do, if you can't exceed 50%, give me free incentive copies. The problem, books without a market. If I'm selling less than 10 copies as a chain of 8 stores, then it's subscription only. When carrying books of lower sale titles, we only had a 73% sell-through over 6 months for a 30% profit. As such, books were selling pretty much only to special orders. When customer drops the title, we eat it. So So buying these really kind of niche books, a lot of times, even if they're coming from a major publisher, is a huge risk for stores. It's a huge risk for stores because they don't know if they're going to sell them. And again, I think it's very, very smart of Peter Simeti to offer returnability because, you know, he can get some books out there, give them some exposure in the shops, and if they don't sell, they can send them back to Alterna. You know, he'll sell them to somebody. Alterna is doing very, very well in a market where, you know, other publishers are not doing so well, but you're not hearing about Alterna because the mainstream comics press don't like them very much for a variety of reasons. You know, nothing that they did wrong. It's just it has a lot to do with the climate in the mainstream comic book industry, and I think you know, there's a threat. There's a threat. So I kind of look at Alterna as being sort of the Tucker of comic books right now. And if you watch the movie Tucker, you'll realize that all of the major auto manufacturers conspired against Mr. Tucker to make sure he couldn't make automobiles. And hopefully this does not happen to Peter Simeti. Number 7, problem: rushed and inconsistent scheduling. The publisher had delays, so we don't see a title for 2 months, and then we see 3 issues in 5 weeks. May help the publisher's bottom line, but destroys our sales tail and diminishes sales. Yeah, I've wondered about that too. When you see, you know, 2 or 3 issues of a comic pop up in a very short period of time, are publishers doing that deliberately to pad their numbers for that month? I have no idea. What publishers can do: if you're late, suck it up. Don't make us retailers pay for your problem. Number 8, the problem: promo items. I love nice promo items. Customers love them to some degree, but even the nicest postcard is often found in the trash can right outside the store. Customers are overwhelmed with advertisements. Some look for those that target them and react. The problem is publishers have a broad brush promotional item and then want to sell it to us. My solution: nope, not paying for your promotions. You're selling us non-returnable product with limited information, and then you want to charge us to promote it? Not happening. Send us the promo items at no cost, and if it's going to raise my sales, I might give you free counter space or free labor to bag stuff them. You know, I remember back in the day when I first started going to comic shops, that was about 10 or 12, and there used to be all kinds of like bag stuffer junk that got put in you know, my bag of comics, and I don't know if those retailers paid for all those little newspapers and stickers and posters and all the other junk that they would give me. So what publishers can do about this? When I opened Coliseum of Comics, I did it on my own dime and didn't realize a profit for several years. Publishers seem to want to put out a new comic to instant profit. This is a broad brush statement, but we're talking about broad brush promos. Give us a minor co-op budget to print our own flyers. Co-op can take the form of funds, add discounts, and add products. This is what the publishers don't seem to understand. They don't understand how much, you know, how much blood, sweat, and tears these comics retailers, you know, put into their businesses, and then, you know, the kind of the disrespect you're seeing from the publishers now toward retailers. I mean, look, where are you going to sell your comics? If all the comic shops go out of business, where are you going to sell your comics? Who's going to champion the comic book industry? Because Hollywood doesn't care. They don't care. It's going to be the comic shops, the retailers, the fans that still go to comic shops, but publishers just don't seem to care. This is a really interesting statement for him to make. So let's face it, we're not exactly partners. So you've got a huge comics retailer basically telling the publishers, you know, he doesn't view you as being partners. It is sort of a weird, you know, relationship. We're all sitting at the same buffet, but the crumbs at the retail end of the table seem to be dwindling. We need to be partners. Some could survive via online and mail order, but far too many people would lose their livelihood if another 500 stores close. There's a point where the systems in place cannot be sustained by the surviving entities. And I think we're reaching that point. I know a lot of people are commenting on that now. I think we're reaching, like, you know, peak comic shop decline, and then at that point it just, the whole thing implodes. And I think when you get down to, you know, under, I mean, I think we're what, 2,000 comic shops, 2,000-ish, 2,500 comic shops. We go any lower than that, and the industry is no longer sustainable in its current form. I don't know if Marvel or DC care. I really don't know, because they are bankrolled by major corporations, and those corporations, I think, have other plans for the IP. You know, when Aquaman is making a ridiculous amount of money, you know, why does you know, DC have to publish comic books? You know, so we'll see. I have 12 years of new comic sales data, but I look at the last issue when ordering comics as there is no pattern to the freefall. If this doesn't, this is interesting. If this doesn't disturb you, it should. I am a single voice, but I'm not alone in my concerns. I think more retailers are going to have to speak up, because the fans that have tried to speak up have been demonized by the comic book publishers. They've been demonized by the comic book creators. They've been demonized by the friendly comic book media. More retailers like Phil Boyle need to speak up. More publishers like Peter Simeti need to speak up and try to do something to stop the hemorrhaging. I mean, maybe comics will never return to being a mainstream hobby again, but at least they can kind of stop the hemorrhaging. But right now, everything's in free fall. Everything's in free fall, and all the boasting of sales numbers by Marvel, etc. It's they're selling fewer books at a higher price tag. They're gouging the existing fan base, and they're hurting retailers, and that's not a sustainable business model at all. So kind of curious on your thoughts. If you've got thoughts about the comic book industry, the state of the comic book industry, do you even care? We have a lot of people that follow the channel that, even though we do comic book videos from time to time, because I used to work in comics, they don't care. And that's kind of sad, but they just don't. But I am concerned. I am very concerned. So if you are a comics fan, you're concerned, please leave a comment, and we'll talk about it. This has been Neon for Clownfish TV. Subscribe for more pop culture news, views, rants, art videos, gaming videos, and more. We will talk later.